Hi guys! So in this video I'm going to show you two ways that I prep and bedazzle my Starbucks cups. I wanted to show you a pink one in particular because it has color behind it, and I do it two ways. I do it with the paint and I do it without the paint. So this one is with some acrylic paint that I got from Walmart. It's this Apple Barrel brand, and then I use a paintbrush, but then I tear that little sponge part off and I use the little handle to help spread the glue. The first way that I'm going to show you is, of course, with the painted cup. I didn't do anything but wash and dry this cup and put some paint on it, and I'm going to be using E6000 for this first technique. Okay, so I like to start with blinging around that logo first. So I just put a thin line of the E6000 and I take that paintbrush handle and then I just kind of evenly spread out that E6000. I like to work with this much because I know that I can do about that much before it dries. It's better to do a small amount of E6000 when you're working because it does dry pretty fast and it's not fun having to scrape E6000 off of your cups, especially when there's paint on your cup. So you just add the rhinestones onto your line of glue one by one until you're done with that first circle. And then I find that it's best to use the honeycomb method on cups like this. I'll show you a little bit later in the video what I mean by the honeycomb method if you don't already know what the honeycomb method is. I also want to point out that sometimes I do use that pointy end of my tool to help spread out the glue as well. You can just wipe it off after you do it, but it does help to kind of flatten out that glue because sometimes it can get a little kind of lumpy, and you don't really want that because it will press up around the rhinestone and it'll create this chunk of glue that kind of looks like your rhinestones are just kind of saturated in this glue, and you don't want that because the finished look will also show that. So here I'm just going through and removing that excess glue. So I use the pointy end of my tool to kind of push it away from the rhinestones, and I'm also using my tool to reposition any rhinestones that are too far from the logo or that don't line up properly or that overlap. You do want to go back through after you lay the rhinestones down and make sure none of those issues occur. Alright, so we're going to add some E6000 on the other side to complete this circle, and I'm going to speed up this part of the video really quick so that we can get to the next part. But you literally just do the same thing that I went over before. You add your glue, spread it out so that it's not too clunky in one spot. You want to make it as flat as possible. And you just go one by one and add those rhinestones as close as possible without them overlapping. Alright, so I also did this part in hyperlapse, and I didn't realize that I wasn't doing it line by line. I kind of just got into the blinging groove, and I'm sorry, I meant to do this line by line for the purposes of tutorial. But eventually, when you know, get in the hang of blinging, you can do 3 or 4 lines at one time. So like I said, E6000 does dry extremely fast, much faster than any other glue I've used. But like I say, the more you practice, the faster you get. So I was able to do those 4 lines with that chunk of glue that I applied to the cup at the top. So I just go back and forth from doing the top lines to going around the circle until the top lines in the circle meet. So do what you're comfortable with. If one line at a time with the glue makes you comfortable without having to kind of scratch off that glue and start over, do that. But once you get the hang of it and you feel like you've practiced enough, I encourage you to use enough glue to do at least 2 lines. Okay, here we go. So with this cup, I kind of offset some of the rhinestones on purpose. I needed to show you guys how you fix an issue when your rhinestones don't line up the way you want them to. So if you can see at the top there with those straight lines, they're done in what is called the honeycomb method. So after you lay your first line of rhinestones, you start to lay the second line by starting your first rhinestone in between the top 2 rhinestones. And I'm gonna show you what I mean by that. I'm kind of trying to zoom in and try to show you what I mean by that. But on this circle part around the logo, it gets a little tricky when you're doing that part. So I'm gonna show you how you can fix that. You just take the pointy end. You can take a toothpick. You can take a rhinestone tool that has this pointy end here and just move your rhinestones. And you want to do this before it dries. That's the important thing. The minute you notice that they're kind of offsetting and they're not lining up the way you want them to, it's best to start immediately trying to move them before that E6000 hardens and kind of cures a little bit. So I'm taking that pointy end and I'm, sliding the rhinestones over a little bit, pushing some of that excess glue away from the rhinestone so it doesn't create a foggy look on top of the rhinestone. Also, the thing about putting that pink background, it does help a little bit for when you accidentally offset your rhinestones and they're not laying the way you want them to. That pink background kind of makes up for that. But at the same time, you don't want too many gaps or spaces. Do you see how I'm able to move some of these rhinestones over after fixing them? It's because something wasn't set correctly. There was too much space in between 2 rhinestones, or it didn't kind of line up between the 2 rhinestones above or below it. So now it's better. It's fixed. See, I'm showing you here the linear, that first line, and how 1, 2 rhinestones right there, and you put that 1 in between those 2. That's what the honeycomb method is. And you're just going to keep going line by line with that technique. It creates a much better, much more professional look. And you're just going to keep going, doing that same thing. I know there was a lot of information thrown into you at once. I'm so sorry about that. But hopefully you understand what I mean by fixing the rhinestones to kind of look a little bit better. You don't want them to just kind of be laid down any old way. It needs to have a more uniform look, or it should have a more uniform look. But you're just going to take those techniques and keep going until the cup is completely bedazzled all over. All right, so here is our next method. Now, as you can see, it doesn't make that much of a difference not having that pink background. Maybe, maybe not. I say it's preference. The cup looks amazing both ways because once all these pink rhinestones are laid down on the cup, you honestly won't even, it's gonna look just fine. I'll show you towards the end. Here's the thing about laying colors down. When you have lighter colors, more like your clears, your silvers, your light pinks, maybe a yellow, maybe even like a sky blue. You don't necessarily have to add color to the back of the cup. It just gives it a better, richer color, if you will. But okay, getting into this particular cup, I did a tutorial. I did a video on how to scuff up your cup using a rotary tool. I can do a video on how to do it with sandpaper, but this particular cup was done with a rotary tool, and I can link the video in the description for you guys if you haven't seen it already. But this one is done with Liquid Fusion, which is my favorite glue to use. As long as you create a rough surface, Liquid Fusion will adhere and it will stay. And in my opinion, it's a little bit better than E6000 because it doesn't have that toxic smell to it. I noticed that a lot of my customers don't like the toxic smell, so I switched to Liquid Fusion. And Liquid Fusion didn't seem to work for me the way it should at first, and that's because I wasn't properly scuffing up my cup or my material the way it should have been. So like I said, as long as you scuff it up the way it needs to be, Liquid Fusion, it's amazing. Okay, so here I'm just going line by line, still using that honeycomb method as best as I can, because sometimes it does get a little offset when you're doing a name, which I am doing on this cup. So something that can help with that is using multiple sizes. So I won't say only, but about 95% of the time use 5mm and 3mm, just those two sizes. They work perfectly for me. So as you get closer to the name, you may have to use the 3mm. There it is, the Liquid Fusion. I'm going to go in and add. Okay, first I'm gonna show you what to do when your glue dries up. So I like to take my pointy end of my picker tool and just stick it inside of that hole, scrape out the glue, or just push it down, and your glue is good to go, because you will have issues where your glue dries up. All right, so some people like to use a precision tip bottle for the Liquid Fusion since it's a lot thinner than the E6000. I don't. I think that this bottle is perfect for applying glue. So you're just gonna go through and apply a thin line of, as thin as you can get, a thin line of the Liquid Fusion glue. And if it seems like it's too clumped up, then go ahead and spread it out with your picker tool or with anything that you can spread it with, as I showed on the other cup. But I find that this glue it dries flat and it dries 100% clear. So even if you get a little bit too much on there, it doesn't affect the cup the way that the E6000 would. It's not going to create those clumps and, thick clumps of glue to make it look like the cup is like saturated. Well, the rhinestones, it won't make it look like the rhinestones are just saturated in glue, because it dries really well. Also, here's another great tip for you guys. A lot of people sometimes tell me that their picker tool stops working, and those wax tools don't stop working. It will get glue on it sometimes. So sometimes your tip will get glue on it and it won't pick up a rhinestone anymore. So what I did was I took the tip and very carefully, because it is wax, very carefully kind of scrape it against something. Not really scrape, but rub it. Sometimes I take the tip of my fingernail and just scrape that glue part off, or I'll just rub it against the table and clean it off later. But if you ever find that your wax tool, any type of wax tool, isn't working, it's probably because it has a little bit of glue on the tip that needs to be scraped off. But do it carefully, or you just might break it. All right, so I wanted to point out to you guys where that curved circular part from the logo and the linear, those straight lines meet, just start from right there. If you can see where I pointed to, just start from there and keep going with straight lines. Makes it easier for you if you just stop at a certain point and just go with straight lines. Now you can keep going around with that circular pattern. You can keep going around with that circular pattern. I've done that on cups before. It is absolutely beautiful, but it's very time consuming. So it's just up to you. I'll insert some pictures at the end of a circular pattern where I just kept going, and maybe I'll do a video on that one day. I don't know. But for beginners, or if you're looking for an easier but still really neat way to do the cup, you want to start, you see right where that line is, and just keep going in a straight line. You may have to alternate between 3mm and 5mm rhinestones, but you're going to get that honeycomb method if, see what I'm doing here, if you pick a spot that are evenly lined up with those two rhinestones at the top, that you can put one in between. So as you can see, I'm having to move that over. 5mm didn't fit there, so I'm gonna have to probably put 2 3mm there to fill in that spot. So as you can see, 2 3mm fit better than 1 5mm. All right, you guys, so here's the cup after it's all done. This is the one that does not have the pink paint in the background. As you can see, the cup looks perfectly fine. It's all pink. You can't tell that the background isn't pink. Also want to apologize to you guys if it seems like I rushed through this one. I am so sorry. Some of my footage was on another SIM card that got corrupted, and I had already had a good amount of footage prepped for this particular video, and I didn't want to scrap the footage that I already used. So I hope that this tutorial was enough for you guys if you're a beginner with Starbucks cups. If not, please leave me some comments, ask me some questions, and I'll be more than happy to answer any questions you may have. But thank you guys so much for watching my video, and if it helped in any kind of way, please let me know. If you feel like there's any improvements I need to make, please let me know that as well too. I'm brand new to this, and I'm just hoping that I can help someone on their bling journey along the way. Again, thank you guys for watching my video, and I'll see you in my next one. Bye.